I always believed Christmas was about family warmth, laughter, and being together. That belief shattered the morning I found a folded note where my coffee mug should have been. My daughter Nicole had taken her husband, his parents, and the $17,000 vacation I paid for, and left without me. No goodbye. No explanation beyond the family needs this time together. Just us. In that moment, the house felt colder than the Michigan snow outside. But here's what they didn't expect. I've spent my life building planning and keeping records. They thought I'd swallow the hurt and keep funding their lives. They were wrong. What came next wasn't anger, it was precision. The kind that changes everything. Christmas morning used to mean the smell of bacon sizzling, the crackle of wrapping paper, and the sound of my daughter's laughter echoing through the house. But this year, silence wrapped around me like a heavy winter coat I couldn't take off. The first thing I saw wasn't a smiling face. It was a folded piece of paper placed neatly where my coffee mug usually sat. My name, written in Nicole's careful handwriting, stared back at me. I didn't open it right away. Something in my gut told me it wasn't going to be the kind of note that warmed a father's heart. The house was still unnervingly so. No faint music from the living room, no excited voices making last-minute plans for our trip to Aspen. I'd spent months preparing that vacation, a full week at one of Colorado's finest resorts, skiing spa treatments, private dinners. A gift not just for Nicole and her husband Zachary, but for his parents Howard and Kinsley. $17,000 worth of memories I thought we'd share together. When I finally opened the note, it was as if someone had punched the air out of my lungs. Dad, we decided to go to Colorado without you. The family needs this time together, just us. We'll be back January the 2nd. Don't worry about the money. We know you can afford it. Thanks for everything. Love, Nicole. I read it twice, hoping I'd misunderstood, but the words were clear. They had left me on Christmas morning, no less. I called Nicole's phone, straight to voicemail. Her cheerful, recorded greeting felt like a cruel joke. Zachary's line rang once before cutting off. Howard's, Kinsley's, all the same. That's when the reality sank in. This wasn't a last-minute decision. This had been planned. My mind started replaying moments from the last few weeks. The awkward glances between them when I mentioned the trip. The way Zachary had joked about me probably enjoying some peace and quiet while they were gone. I had laughed then, not realizing I was the punchline. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing off the walls. Their bedroom doors were open beds made in a hurry. Nicole's closet had an empty space where her big suitcase normally sat. Zachary's shaving kit was gone from the bathroom counter. Every little detail confirmed it. This was no accident. I stood in front of the Christmas tree, its lights blinking cheerfully, as if mocking me. Beneath it sat neatly wrapped gifts with tags that read, "To Nicole, with love from Dad." To Zachary, hoping this year brings you everything you want. I'd written those words with genuine warmth. Now they felt like reminders of how little my presence mattered compared to my wallet. I sat in my leather recliner, staring at that note on the kitchen counter. They thought I was just a lonely old man who would take the blow quietly, but they'd forgotten something important. I've spent my life building businesses, negotiating deals, and keeping meticulous records. And if there's one thing I know, it's that betrayal has a cost, and I was about to make sure they paid every cent. I didn't move from that recliner for a long time. The tree lights kept blinking each pulse, reminding me of conversations that now felt like rehearsed lies. 3 months earlier, I'd announced the trip during Sunday dinner. Nicole had been struggling since her divorce, and Zachary's parents had never taken a real vacation. I thought I was doing something good, something a family would remember fondly for the rest of their lives. I could still see Nicole's face when I told them. "Dad, you're incredible," she'd said, throwing her arms around me. Zachary shook my hand with a firm grip, thanking me like a son-in-law who meant it. Howard and Kinsley had teared up, saying they'd never dreamed of seeing a place like Aspen. At the time, those tears felt like gratitude. Now I knew better. They weren't overwhelmed by generosity. They were calculating how much they could take without having to give me a seat at the table. The more I thought about it, the more pieces started falling into place. Little comments I had brushed off, phone calls that ended quickly when I entered the room, glances exchanged between them when I mentioned how excited I was for our trip. I'd mistaken those signs for nothing. But now looking back, it was as if they'd been laying the groundwork for this exclusion for weeks, maybe months. I picked up the phone again, trying each number a second time. Nicole. Voicemail. Zachary. Voicemail. Howard and Kinsley didn't even let it ring before sending me to voicemail. My calls weren't welcome, not today. Probably not any day until they came back expecting smiles and continued support. That was the moment the shift happened. A cold clarity replaced the shock. I had spent my life thinking generosity built stronger bonds. But with some people, generosity isn't a bridge, it's a leash. And the moment you let go, you find out whether they cared about you or only about the benefits you provided. I went to my office. The desk was as I'd left it, polished wood drawers, organized files labeled with precise handwriting. I pulled open the drawer where I kept all my travel documents. The Aspen folder was thick with printed itineraries, booking confirmations, and payment receipts. I flipped through each page, the total amount staring back at me like an invoice for my own humiliation. There it was. Ski lessons for 5, a private chef for New Year's Eve, a wine tasting tour, spa packages. I had upgraded their rooms, requested special touches, all to make this vacation unforgettable. And it would be unforgettable, just not in the way they expected. I stared at the resort's number highlighted in yellow marker. I'd called them dozens of times during planning. Now I would call for a different reason. My hand hovered over the phone. This wasn't a rash decision. It was a first step. They thought they had control because they had my money. But money is just a tool. In the right hands, it can build or dismantle anything. And I was about to dismantle everything they thought was theirs. The resort's receptionist answered with the polished cheer I'd heard so many times during the planning phase. "Good morning, Little Nell Resort. This is Rebecca speaking. How may I assist you?" "This is Larry Hughes," I said, my voice steady. "My family checked in last night under the Hughes reservation. I need to make some changes." "Oh yes, Mr. Hughes," she replied warmly. They arrived safely and seemed very excited about their stay. "What would you like to adjust?" I opened my binder to the detailed itinerary, every activity carefully selected for them. Cancel the spa appointments scheduled for December 27th. All 5 of them. A pause. "Sir, those are premium bookings during peak season. There will be significant cancellation fees. Cancel them." The sound of her keyboard clicking filled the silence. "Certainly, sir. Anything else?" "Yes. The private chef for New Year's Eve, cancel that as well. That's one of our most requested services during the holiday," she offered cautiously. "Would you prefer to reschedule?" "No. Cancel it." I drew a bold red line through the $2,400 entry in my binder. Then came the ski lessons, the wine tasting tour, the private shopping appointment. One by one, I eliminated every luxury. Each stroke of my pen felt like erasing another piece of their entitlement. Rebecca's voice faltered. "Mr. Hughes, this represents most of your planned activities. Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," I said evenly. "One more thing, remove my credit card authorization for any additional charges. They can cover their own extras now." The silence that followed was almost satisfying. "Understood, sir." We'll make those adjustments immediately." I hung up and leaned back in my chair. The first domino had fallen, but this wasn't just about a vacation. It was about years of one-sided generosity that had turned into expectation. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Inside were 7 years of receipts, each meticulously stored in manila folders. Every tuition payment, every car loan I'd co-signed, every temporary loan that had never been repaid. The university folder alone was $180,000, Nicole's psychology degree that she'd never used. Then the wedding, $65,000 for the fairy tale day she'd wanted complete with a dress that cost more than some people's cars. An $85,000 apartment down payment structured as a formal loan with both Nicole and Zachary's signatures on the promissory note. There were car purchases too. Nicole's BMW, Zachary's truck, $80,000 combined, both with my name as guarantor. And then the monthly support, rent assistance, groceries, insurance, emergencies, averaging $2,500 a month for 3 years. Another $90,000 gone. $500,000. Documented. Traceable. Legally binding in some cases. They thought they'd cut me out without consequence. But I wasn't the kind of man who made empty threats or forgot the details. In business, you learn that trust is a form of currency, and once it's spent, you collect the debt. This was no longer about Christmas morning. It was about collecting what I was owed financially, legally, and morally. The numbers didn't just sit on paper, they told a story. A story of trust given freely, of sacrifices made without hesitation, and of people who mistook generosity for obligation. I had spent decades running a construction business where contracts were sacred and debts were settled. Family had blurred those lines for me, but now I was ready to draw them sharper than ever. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I knew as well as my own, Michael Richardson, my attorney for over 20 years. He'd handled everything from business acquisitions to my retirement planning. If anyone knew how to turn this into a legal strategy, it was Michael. "Larry," he greeted, his voice warm and casual. "Merry Christmas, my friend." "Michael," I said flatly, "I need legal advice today." There was a pause long enough for him to register the edge in my tone. "All right," he replied, his voice shifting into professional mode. "Tell me what's going on." My daughter and her husband left me alone on Christmas morning after I paid for a $17,000 family vacation. They took his parents with them. I've documented over $500,000 in financial support over the last decade. I want to know what I can legally recover. He didn't speak for a few seconds. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." "All right," he said finally. The apartment down payment was that structured as a loan, yes. Promissory note signed by both Nicole and Zachary, callable with 30 days' notice. Good. That's enforceable. Credit cards, I'm the primary holder. They're just authorized users. Then you can remove them immediately. Any debt they've charged becomes your responsibility, but you can cut off access today. Vehicle loans, I co-signed both. If they miss a payment, the bank can demand full payoff or repossess. Perfect. Larry, from a legal standpoint, you hold all the leverage. The emotional betrayal is harder to quantify, but financially, you have them in a vice. Do you want me to prepare the apartment loan recall notice? Yes. Have it ready tomorrow morning. He hesitated. Once we start, there's no easy way to walk it back. Are you sure you don't want to try mediation first? They made their choice, Michael, I said. Now I'm making mine. After hanging up, I unlocked my fireproof safe. Inside were the documents I'd hoped never to use: loan agreements, co-signed contracts, financial guarantees. Each one was a chain they'd chosen to wrap around themselves, believing I'd never pull it tight. My phone buzzed. Nicole's name lit up the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Dad." Her voice was panicked. What did you do? They're saying all our reservations are canceled, the spa, the restaurants, I canceled them. Her breath caught. You can't do that, I already did. This is insane, she cried. We planned this whole trip around those bookings. No, I said quietly. I planned this trip. You decided I wasn't part of it. For the first time in years, I felt the balance of power shift, and it was shifting in my favor. Nicole's breathing quickened on the other end of the line. Dad, let's talk about this when we get back. We can work things out. I stared at the neat stack of loan documents on my desk. No, Nicole. We're not going to work things out in some vague conversation where you cry and I end up paying for more of your life. This is business now. You're being unreasonable, she snapped, the panic in her voice edged with irritation. I'm being practical, I said. Michael Richardson is preparing the legal papers to call in your apartment loan. You and Zachary have 30 days from receipt of notice to pay the $85,000 you owe. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. You wouldn't. I already have, I replied. Your credit cards will be canceled by noon tomorrow. Any bank guarantees I've signed will be revoked. If the car payments aren't made, the vehicles will be repossessed. Her voice broke. We made a mistake, okay? We should have told you. We should have invited you. You made a plan, Nicole, I interrupted. Not a mistake. You coordinated, discussed, and executed a plan to leave me alone on Christmas morning while using my money. That's not a slip-up, that's betrayal. In the background, I heard Zachary's voice. Larry, let's not be dramatic. We thought you'd enjoy some time alone. You're always saying you like peace and quiet. I almost laughed. Don't try to reframe this as some kind of favor. You took my money and left me behind because you didn't want me there. That's the truth. Zachary's tone hardened. You're going to destroy your own family over this? No, I said evenly. You already did. I'm just adjusting my financial portfolio to reflect reality. Howard's voice came through next, shaky but attempting calm. Larry, son, we never meant to hurt you. We thought the kids knew what they were doing. Howard, I said I'm not your son, and you're not innocent here. You could have called me. You could have refused to go. Instead, you chose sides. Nicole began crying openly now. You're leaving us with nothing. We can't survive without your help. I let the weight of that hang for a moment before responding. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided my presence wasn't worth your company. You've treated me like an ATM for years. That account is now closed. There was a long, strained silence. I could picture them standing in their luxury suite in Aspen, suddenly realizing they weren't untouchable. Zachary muttered something under his breath before saying, You'll regret this when you're alone in that big house. Threats don't work on me, Zachary, I said calmly, especially when I have every word you've just spoken recorded. The call ended abruptly, but the air in my office felt different, cleaner somehow. For the first time in years, I wasn't letting guilt dictate my choices. They'd made their move. Now it was my turn, and I was just getting started. The morning after that call, I woke before sunrise. Old habits from my business days die hard, especially when you're about to execute a plan that requires precision. The coffee brewed in the kitchen while I sat at my desk reviewing the sequence of moves I'd mapped out in my head the night before. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about structure, consequence, and closure. At 8:00 sharp, I called Michael Richardson. He didn't waste time with small talk. I have the loan recall notice drafted, he said. $85,000 plus interest. Certified mail delivery is ready to go. Send it, I told him. He paused for a beat. Larry, once they get this, the clock starts ticking. You're giving them 30 days to pay in full. If they don't, it goes to court. That's exactly the point, I replied. I want a paper trail that's ironclad. By 8:30, the paperwork was on its way. Next came the credit cards. I called the bank's fraud prevention department, an ironic choice of department but fitting. Remove Nicole Hughes and Zachary Thompson as authorized users on all accounts. Effective immediately, I said. The representative hesitated, perhaps sensing family tension. Sir, this will cancel their ability to make purchases instantly. Are you sure? Yes, I said, without hesitation. They no longer have my authorization. It felt clean, like clearing out a room that had been cluttered for years. At 9:15, I contacted Chase Auto Finance. I want my guarantor status removed from the Zachary Thompson vehicle loan, I told the representative. She explained the process. He would have to qualify independently or find another co-signer. If neither happened, the loan would be callable immediately. That's his problem now, I said. By 10 Bulwark, the major pieces were in motion. Every decision was documented, every step traceable. I didn't want there to be any doubt about the legitimacy of my actions, not in the eyes of the court, not in the eyes of anyone they might try to sway with their version of events. An hour later, Michael called back. Larry, I've reviewed your financial history with them. We can also move to recover certain amounts under unjust enrichment and breach of trust, especially since you have written proof they excluded you while benefiting from your money. Do you want to proceed? Yes, I said simply, but make sure every filing is airtight. I want them to know there's no room to maneuver. The rest of the day was quiet. Too quiet. No phone calls from Nicole, no text messages. I knew they were talking among themselves, scrambling to understand how quickly their safety net had been pulled. The truth was, I had always given them the benefit of the doubt. I'd told myself they loved me even if they didn't show it well. But now with the mask off, I could see them for what they were: opportunists who had mistaken kindness for weakness. They thought Christmas morning was the end of the story. What they didn't realize was that it was only the prologue. The real chapter, the one they'd never forget, was just beginning. 4 days later, just before sunset, I saw Zachary's truck pull into my driveway. The tires crunched over the icy gravel with a little more force than necessary. From my living room window, I could see the entire group inside Nicole in the passenger seat, her face pale and blotchy from crying. Howard and Kinsley squeezed into the back, both looking worn and uncomfortable. I opened the door before they could knock. Come in, I said, my voice steady but devoid of warmth. No hugs, no handshakes, just the formality you'd extend to business associates with overdue accounts. They shuffled into the living room and sat down hesitantly, as though the furniture itself might judge them. Nicole was the first to speak, her voice trembling. Dad, we're sorry. We didn't think I held up a hand. Stop. You thought plenty. You planned it, you discussed it, and you acted on it. This wasn't an accident. Zachary leaned forward, trying to match my calm. Larry, look. We didn't mean for it to get this bad. We figured you'd enjoy some quiet time at home, and don't insult me, I cut in. You didn't leave me behind for my benefit. You left me behind because you didn't want me there. The fact that I paid for it all just made it easier for you. Howard cleared his throat. Larry, we thought the kids knew what they were doing. We didn't want to get in the middle. You were in the middle the moment you accepted a free luxury vacation that excluded the person who paid for it, I said flatly. Nicole's tears began to flow again. We can't afford to pay you back, not all at once. Please just give us time. I reached for the folder on the coffee table and slid it toward her. You have exactly 30 days from the date on this notice to pay the apartment loan $85,000 plus interest. After that, it goes to court." Her hands shook as she flipped the first page. "You're really doing this?" "I've already done it," I said. "Your credit cards are canceled. The car loans I guaranteed are now your sole responsibility. If you miss a payment, the vehicles will be repossessed. The spa days and ski lessons gone. The chef gone. The wine tour gone." Zachary's jaw tightened. "You're destroying us over this." I leaned forward, my voice low and deliberate. "I'm not destroying you. I'm just no longer financing you." Kinsley, who had been quiet until now, spoke up softly. "We never meant to hurt you, Larry. We just thought you thought I was a wallet with no feelings," I said, cutting her off. "And now you're learning that every wallet can close." The room went silent. For a long moment, no one moved. I could see the reality settling over them. The vacations, the safety net, the comfortable life, all of it was gone. When they finally stood to leave, no one said goodbye. The door shut behind them with a quiet click, but in my mind it sounded like the final slam of a vault door. It started 2 days after their visit. My cousin Margaret called, her voice carrying that careful tone people use when they're about to tell you something unpleasant. "Larry, I've been getting phone calls. From Nicole, from Zachary, even from Howard and Kinsley." I set my coffee cup down slowly. "What kind of calls?" "They're all saying the same thing, word for word almost. That you've become paranoid, suspicious, and unwell. That you're pushing your family away over money." I let her finish without interruption, my mind already cataloging the pattern. Scripted language, coordinated talking points. This wasn't a concerned family intervention. This was a campaign. Margaret, a retired marketing executive, didn't mince words. "Larry, they're trying to control the narrative before yours gains traction. They know you have the receipts, literally and figuratively, so they're trying to undermine your credibility." "Who else have they called?" I asked. "I think they're working their way down the family tree. Probably some of your neighbors, too. I'd bet they're trying to plant the idea that you're not thinking clearly, so anything you say about them will sound like the ranting of an unstable old man." It was a sharp move on their part, I had to admit. But in business, I'd learned a simple truth. Sharp moves cut both ways. "I need you to document everything they said," I told her. "Dates, times, exact words." "Already started," she said. "Figured you'd want that." When we hung up, I opened a new document on my laptop. The title at the top read, "SAR Reputation Defense File." Under it, I began logging every call, every comment, every person they contacted. This wasn't about family drama anymore. It was about countering a deliberate attempt to damage my standing. By the end of the day, I had confirmed that at least 6 relatives and 3 neighbors had been approached with the same claims. They said I was hoarding money, lashing out without reason, and needing intervention for my own good. The irony was rich, coming from people who had depended on me financially for over a decade. Margaret called back that evening. "You know, Larry, this is classic damage control. They can't fight you on the facts, so they're trying to make you the unreliable narrator in your own story. Then I'll make sure my version is backed by more than words I said. I'll have documents, legal filings, and sworn statements. If they want a credibility contest, they picked the wrong opponent." That night, I sent an email to Michael Richardson copying my accountant, David Cruz. Subject line: escalation, reputation defense. I attached a preliminary list of calls and witnesses along with the timeline of events leading up to Christmas morning. The plan was simple: make my case bulletproof before they ever had a chance to twist it in court or in public opinion. By the time I shut down my computer, I felt the same clarity I used to feel before a big negotiation. They thought they were just smearing an old man's name. What they didn't realize was that they'd just moved the fight into a territory I knew better than anyone: the court of documented truth. It was just past 7 in the evening when the sound of tires on my driveway pulled me from my reading chair. Outside, the December dusk was heavy and still. Then came the slam of a truck door, Zachary's truck. He walked toward my front door with the kind of posture I'd seen in men trying to mask desperation with aggression. I didn't rush. I reached over to the small panel beside my chair and armed the security system. Every camera around my property clicked to life, feeding directly to my monitors and backing up to a secure cloud. In my years running a business, I'd learned that confrontations go a lot smoother when you control the record. The pounding on the door rattled the frame. "Open up, Larry. We need to talk." I opened it just enough to step into the threshold, my stance calm but unyielding. "Evening, Zachary." He didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed past me into the living room. "You think you can destroy my family with your legal games?" "I think I can collect debts that are legally owed to me," I said evenly. He stepped closer, closing the space like he was squaring up. "You're ruining our lives over hurt feelings." "This isn't about feelings," I replied. "It's about contract signatures and obligations." His voice dropped the tone, shifting into something darker. "You know what happens to stubborn old men who live alone in big houses, accidents, break-ins. Bad things happen when there's nobody around to help." I didn't move. "Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality," he said. "Your fancy alarm system won't save you if something happens. Maybe you should start thinking about family loyalty." I nodded slowly, as though considering his words. "Come with me." He followed me down the hall to my home office. The wall of monitors flickered with live feeds from every angle of my property: driveway, porch, back deck, garage. Each one showed a time-stamp, crystal-clear audio and a perfect shot of Zachary standing in my living room making threats, his face drained of color. "You can't record me without permission. In my home, I can record anyone who steps through that door," I said. "And in this state, threats against a senior citizen carry enhanced penalties. Everything here is already backed up to the cloud and sent to my lawyer." He shifted his weight, suddenly less sure of himself. "You need to delete that." "I need to do nothing except give it to law enforcement, which I'm about to do." I picked up my phone and dialed 911. "Yes, this is Larry Hughes at 847 Maple Ridge Drive. I have a family member in my home making criminal threats against me. I am 62 years old, and I have video evidence." Zachary's eyes went wide. "Wait, Larry." The dispatcher kept me on the line until the patrol cars arrived less than 10 minutes later. When the officers stepped inside, I handed them printed screenshots and explained what had happened. "Mr. Thompson, the lead officer, said you're under arrest for criminal intimidation and threats against an elderly person." The handcuffs clicked shut with a finality that sounded a lot like justice. As they led him out, he glanced back at me. "You don't know what you've started." I met his stare without blinking. "No, Zachary. I know exactly what I've started." The morning after Zachary's arrest, my lawyer Michael Richardson arrived at my house with a briefcase that looked heavier than usual. He set it on my dining table and opened it like he was laying out evidence for a jury. "It's all here," he said. "Full judgment in your favor. The court has approved the apartment loan recovery, $85,000 plus interest and legal fees. The vehicle guarantees are voided, and we have the official notice from the bank. They'll repossess both cars if a single payment is missed." I scanned each document slowly, not because I doubted him, but because I wanted to feel the weight of every page. These weren't just legal papers. They were the receipts for over a decade of generosity squandered and abused. Michael continued, "Zachary's criminal charge for threatening a senior will make him practically unemployable in any professional capacity. Employers check public records. This will follow him for years. That part didn't bring me joy, it brought clarity. Actions have consequences, and for once, those consequences weren't mine to shoulder. By the end of the week, their apartment hit the market. The sale moved quickly, cash buyers, no contingencies. The proceeds went straight toward the judgment. Within days, both the BMW and the truck were gone, repossessed without ceremony. Through my network of neighbors and acquaintances, I learned the new arrangement, 5 adults, crammed into Howard and Kinsley's modest one-bedroom apartment. Howard's recliner had been shoved into a corner of the living room to make space for an air mattress. Nicole was working a retail job for the first time since college. Zachary couldn't find steady work with a criminal record hanging over him. They showed up at my door exactly a week after the repossession. This time there was no pretense of strength, just exhaustion. Nicole's eyes were red and puffy, her voice raw. "Dad, we were wrong. Completely wrong. We shouldn't have done what we did. Please just help us." I stayed standing while they sat like defendants awaiting sentencing. "Help you. You've made it clear my role in this family is limited to my wallet, and that's closed." Zachary's tone was stripped of arrogance now. I said things I shouldn't have. I was scared, angry, stupid. I know I can't undo it, but we can try to fix it. Howard looked older than I remembered, his voice thin. "Larry, we can't keep this up. The stress is killing us." I studied their faces. They wanted mercy, but not accountability. "If you want to fix this, you start with full honesty. How long was this trip planned without me? Who suggested it? Who agreed to it?" Nicole looked at her hands. 3 weeks before Christmas. Zachary suggested it first, and I went along with it. Howard and Kinsley agreed. We all did it together. Hearing it from her mouth didn't sting, it solidified my resolve. "Then you already know why I can't help you. You made a collective decision. Now you can live with a collective outcome." When they left, there was no shouting, no slamming doors, just the quiet sound of people realizing their safety net was gone for good. It was a cold Thursday afternoon when I saw them coming up the walkway again. Nicole holding a bouquet of white lilies, Zachary a few steps behind, with his head tilted just enough to project humility. Howard and Kinsley followed their expressions, carefully arranged into a mix of concern and weariness. I didn't need a crystal ball to know this wasn't a spontaneous act of remorse. It was theater. When I opened the door, Nicole pressed the flowers into my hands before I could even greet her. "Daddy," she began, her voice trembling in a way that felt just a little too precise. "I love you so much, and I'm so sorry for everything we did." The tears were ready on cue, her timing almost professional. They filed into the living room like mourners attending a wake. Nicole took the center of the sofa, curling into herself, just enough to seem vulnerable. Zachary stayed behind her, speaking in that low, measured tone people use when they've practiced their lines. "Larry, I've thought about what I said to you every night since it happened. I disrespected the man who gave us everything. I understand now." Howard and Kinsley played their part too. "Life's too short for this," Kinsley said softly, her hands folded in her lap. "We're still family no matter what's happened." As they spoke, I noticed something small but telling. Nicole's phone, placed casually on the sofa cushion beside her, was angled just enough to face the conversation. A faint red recording dot glowed at the top of the screen. She was recording, maybe to edit later for sympathy, maybe for legal use. Either way, it told me exactly how genuine this reconciliation was. I let them talk. About regret, about learning lessons, about wanting to rebuild. Zachary glanced at his watch 3 times in less than 10 minutes. The gesture quick but impossible to miss. If this was truly the most important conversation of his life, his attention wouldn't be split. When they finished their speeches, I leaned back in my chair and studied each of them. "Tell me," I said, "what exactly do you think rebuilding trust looks like?" Nicole launched into an answer about spending more time together and showing appreciation. It was too polished, too free of hesitation, like a student reciting lines they'd memorized. I caught her eyes flicker toward the phone again. I nodded slowly. "You seem distracted, Nicole. Is something on your phone more important than this conversation?" Her shoulders stiffened. "No, I'm focused on us, Dad." "Good," I said. "Because from where I'm sitting, this feels less like a family conversation and more like a performance. And I'm not in the market for a show." The faintest crack appeared in her expression, but she quickly replaced it with the same wounded look she'd walked in with. She didn't know it yet, but the script she'd rehearsed was about to fall apart. I let the silence stretch just long enough for them to wonder if I was buying into their performance. Nicole's hand twitched toward the phone beside her, the movement almost imperceptible, but I've spent my life watching people telegraph their intentions without realizing it. "You know, I began my tone calm but deliberate in business. I always knew a negotiation was failing when the other side started rehearsing instead of talking." Zachary tilted his head. "We're not negotiating, Larry. We're apologizing." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "No, you're performing. And bad performances leave evidence." I nodded toward the phone on the sofa. "That recording you've had running since you sat down, it's sloppy work." Nicole froze, then forced a laugh that sounded more brittle than amused. "Recording, Dad, I'm not." "Don't insult me." I cut in. "The red indicator light is clearly visible, and if you think I don't recognize the angle of a phone deliberately placed to capture audio and video, you've forgotten who you're dealing with." Zachary shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting to Nicole's phone. "This is ridiculous. You're paranoid." "Am I asked, reaching over and picking up the device. Her passcode, her birthday, still worked. The screen lit up to reveal a live recording time-stamped from the moment she walked into my house. Nicole's voice cracked. "Dad, we just wanted a record so we could remember what we said. So you couldn't twist it later." I set the phone down on the coffee table with deliberate care. "You came here to manipulate me, hoping you could edit together a few teary moments for whoever you think will side with you. You've already tried to smear my name to family and neighbors. This was the next step in your campaign." Howard spoke up for the first time, his voice shaking. "Larry, that's not fair." "What's not fair," I interrupted, "is pretending this is about reconciliation when it's about damage control. You don't rebuild trust with lies layered on top of betrayal." Nicole's eyes welled up again, but the effect was hollow now that the pretense had been stripped away. "We're desperate, Dad. We have nothing. You've taken everything from us." I leaned back, letting the weight of my words settle. "No, Nicole. You took everything for granted. I simply stopped supplying it." Zachary's jaw clenched, but he stayed seated. "So what now? You just closed the door on us forever." I stood, signaling the conversation was over. "I closed the door on manipulation, deceit, and entitlement. If there's ever a day you come here without an agenda, maybe we'll have something to talk about. But today isn't that day." They didn't argue as they left, though. Nicole snatched her phone from the table on the way out. The door closed behind them with a quiet click, and I returned to my chair. Some people think exposing a lie is about shouting it from the rooftops. I've found it's far more effective to hold up a mirror and let them watch themselves unravel. The morning after their staged apology, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Their visit hadn't stirred guilt or softened my stance, it had reinforced it. Every word, every glance toward that recording phone had told me that nothing had changed, except their circumstances. They weren't here to make amends. They were here to regain access to my resources. I poured a cup of coffee and carried it into my office, the one place in my house where sentiment never clouded judgment. On my desk sat the thick folder from Michael Richardson containing every legal action already in motion. Next to it was my estate plan, still bearing Nicole's name in large, undeniable print as a primary beneficiary. That would change today. I called Michael at 8:15. "We need to update the will," I told him. He didn't hesitate. "I figured that was coming. How do you want it restructured?" "Remove Nicole Hughes, Zachary Thompson, Howard, and Kinsley entirely. Every asset, every account, every piece of property, no claims, no partial inheritance, no trusts in their names. Replace them with Margaret Reynolds and the Detroit Children's Hospital." "Understood," he said. "Do you want to include a statement of intent for why they've been excluded?" "It's not required, but it makes it harder for them to challenge later." "Yes," I replied. "Document everything. Dates, events, proof of premeditated exclusion from the Christmas trip, the smear campaign, the staged apology. I want the language airtight." Michael chuckled without humor. "Larry, this will be one of the most bulletproof wills I've ever drafted. They won't get a penny even if they spend years trying." By 10 to return, we were sitting in his office finalizing the changes. The signing was straightforward pages of legal precision, reduced to my initials and signature. It was all business, just as it should be. When it was done, Michael slid the updated documents back into the folder. "This is now the legally binding truth," he said. "They have no inheritance, no future claim, no safety net. If they ever try to sue, it will cost them money they don't have, and they'll lose." Walking out of his office, I felt lighter, not because I was punishing them, but because I'd removed the last leverage they might have held over me. They could no longer threaten to make things ugly in exchange for keeping their place in my estate. That ship had sailed, and I was the one who'd sunk it. That evening, I sat in my living room, looking around at the home I'd built and maintained without their help. The Christmas decorations were still up, though the holiday itself had been stripped of its warmth. I decided they'd come down tomorrow, not out of bitterness, but to mark the end of a chapter. For the first time in decades, my future was mine alone to decide, and I intended to spend every remaining day investing in people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. It arrived on the 1st of the month, tucked among bills and flyers. A thin envelope with my address written in Nicole's familiar looping handwriting. No return address, just my name in a hand that had once signed birthday cards and Father's Day notes. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming beside me, and opened it carefully. Inside was a single page of lined paper creased twice and smelling faintly of cheap perfume. The words wavered where the ink had blotted. Whether from rushed writing or genuine tears, I couldn't tell. "Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from us, but I have to try. We're living at Uncle Bob's trailer park now. Zachary, me, Howard, and Kinsley, all in one single wide with his family. The kids sleep on air mattresses in the living room. I'm working 2 jobs, a grocery store and a gas station, just to help with groceries. Zachary still can't get steady work because of his record. Howard's blood pressure medication costs more than we can afford. Kinsley's arthritis is getting worse in this cold. I'm not asking for much, just enough to get us into a small apartment so the older folks can have some dignity. Maybe $500 a month just until we get on our feet. I know I was wrong about everything, but we're family. Please, Dad. We've learned our lesson. Love, Nicole." I read it twice. The first time as a father feeling the old reflex to help. The second time as the man who'd been betrayed with precision and calculation. What stood out wasn't the description of their hardship. It was the same misunderstanding that had always existed. She still believed this was about punishment, She still thought the issue was me being upset over a single holiday. But this was never about one Christmas. It was about years of entitlement disguised as love, about trust, broken in a way that no check could repair. She thought money was the bridge back to me. She didn't realize that bridge had burned the moment they chose to exclude me while using my resources. I folded the letter and slipped it into a folder in my office alongside the legal documents and the printouts of their group chat from Nicole's phone. It would stay there not as a weapon, but as a record. No reply was necessary. Any answer, even a refusal, would give them hope that I might eventually relent. Silence would speak louder. That evening I called Margaret. "Anything new from our friends?" I asked. She sighed. "Only that they're trying to sell a few personal items online." Desperation's setting in. "But don't feel guilty, Larry. They wrote their own ending." "I don't feel guilty," I said. "I feel free." As I hung up, I realized that was the truth. The urge to fix their lives had finally been replaced by the resolve to live mine. And I wasn't about to go backward. In the weeks after Nicole's letter, I settled into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. For the first time, my phone wasn't a source of dread. There were no sudden emergency calls about car repairs, overdue rent, or surprise medical bills. No one was treating my bank account like a community fund. The silence wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I started my mornings with coffee in the sunroom, a view of the snow-covered yard stretching beyond the glass. I read books that had been gathering dust, watched documentaries I'd bookmarked years ago, and even picked up an old hobby restoring antique clocks. The steady, patient work of bringing them back to life felt symbolic. Margaret called often, sometimes just to talk, other times to nudge me toward something new. "There's a dinner theater downtown," she said one afternoon. "You should come with me. I've already got a ticket with your name on it." I hesitated. Socializing outside of business functions had never been my strong suit, but I agreed. That evening, I found myself laughing at corny jokes, eating food I didn't have to cook, and sitting beside people who enjoyed my company without expecting a thing in return. A week later, I met my old business partner David for lunch. He'd heard bits and pieces of the situation from mutual contacts, but I laid it out plainly, no theatrics, just facts. He listened, nodded, and then grinned. "Larry, you just freed up a lot of capital, both financial and emotional. How about we put some of it into a project we'll actually enjoy?" We talked investments over stakes, the kind of conversation I used to thrive on before family drama had swallowed my attention. By the time dessert arrived, we were sketching ideas on napkins like we had 20 years ago. At home, I began making changes that reflected this new chapter. The dining room, once a place where I hosted dinners for people who saw me as a wallet, became a workspace for planning trips and projects I actually wanted to pursue. The guest bedrooms were cleared and redecorated, not for ungrateful family members, but for friends or fellow travelers who might visit. One Saturday, I joined a local hiking group. Out on the trail, breathing in crisp winter air, I felt the strange but welcome sensation of belonging without obligation. No one cared what I owned, only that I kept pace and enjoyed the view. It struck me then justice hadn't required shouting matches or public revenge. It had required ending the cycle. My family had mistaken my generosity for weakness. I'd mistaken their dependency for closeness. Both illusions were gone now. That night, I wrote a single sentence on a notepad I keep in my study: "Freedom isn't given, it's taken back." I tore off the page and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk where I could see it every day. For the first time in decades, my life wasn't being lived for someone else's comfort. And I wasn't just surviving without them. I was thriving. It was a crisp Saturday morning when I decided to do something that had been sitting in the back of my mind for weeks. I'd been reclaiming my time, my energy, my life, but now I wanted to make it permanent. Not just in spirit, but in black and white legal ink that no amount of guilt-tripping or manipulation could undo. The thought came to me over breakfast, the morning sun spilling across the kitchen table. I'd been leafing through a brochure from the Detroit Children's Hospital, one of the organizations I'd quietly supported for years. Their latest letter thanked me for my ongoing donations and mentioned a new pediatric wing that still needed funding. By the time I finished my coffee, the decision was made. That afternoon, I called Michael Richardson. "I'm ready to finalize the estate plan we drafted," I told him. "You mean the one that removes Nicole and the rest entirely?" he asked. "That's the one. But I want to go further. I want to make the Detroit Children's Hospital the primary beneficiary of the bulk of my assets, and I want it done now. No delays, no loopholes." Michael's tone warmed. "Larry, that's going to send a message they won't be able to misinterpret. That's the idea." Within days, I was sitting in Michael's office again, signing the final set of documents. My entire estate house investment savings and life insurance was now legally bound to either my cousin Margaret or the hospital. Nicole, Zachary, Howard, and Kinsley were excluded in explicit language, the reasons detailed and documented. The ink was barely dry when the first ripple hit. Margaret called that evening, barely able to contain her amusement. "Larry, I just got a call from Nicole. She somehow found out you've updated your will." I smiled into the phone. "How she ran into a friend of mine at the grocery store. Word got back that you've been meeting with your lawyer. She didn't get details, but she's convinced you're cutting her out completely." "She's not wrong," I said. Margaret chuckled. "She's panicking. Said she's going to fix this before it's too late." The next morning, I got the proof myself. A text from an unknown number popped up on my phone. "Dad, I heard you've been making changes to your will. Can we please talk? It doesn't have to be like this." I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the day meeting with the hospital's development director, finalizing exactly how my donation would be allocated. My gift would fund a new wing and a scholarship program for medical staff training, both carrying my name. For once, my money would go towards something that couldn't turn around and betray me. That night, as I stood in my living room looking at the Christmas tree I still hadn't taken down, I realized the symbolism. The decorations were a reminder of the day they'd left me behind. But the estate plan, that was the day I left them behind. And unlike ornaments, this wasn't something that could be packed away. It was late afternoon when I saw her car pull into the driveway, a dented sedan I didn't recognize. Nicole stepped out slowly, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. Her posture was different this time. There was no defiance, no exaggerated sadness, just a kind of tight, restless energy that told me she'd rehearsed whatever was about to happen. I met her at the door before she could knock. "Nicole." "Dad," she said, forcing a small smile. "Can I come in?" I hesitated a moment, then stepped aside. She walked into the living room, her eyes moving over the space like she was checking for an audience. "I've been hearing things," she began, "about you, changing your will." "Is it true?" I sat in my chair and gestured toward the sofa. "It's true." Her face tightened. "Why, I know we've had problems, but cutting me out completely, that's extreme. You plan to exclude me from my own Christmas vacation after I paid for it. You lied about your intentions, tried to smear my name, staged a fake apology, while secretly recording me and your husband threatened me in my own home. That's not problems, Nicole. That's a pattern." She shook her head quickly. "I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter. Family is supposed to forgive. Forgiveness," I said evenly, "isn't the same as restoration. I can forgive you in my own heart without leaving you 1 cent. Her voice rose. "So you'd rather give everything to strangers?" "Not strangers," I corrected. children who need life-saving care, doctors who will train and serve long after I'm gone, people who won't use my generosity as a weapon against me. She leaned forward, her tone shifting into something more urgent. Dad, we're not doing well. Zachary can't find steady work. Howard and Kinsley are struggling. If you cut us out, you're condemning us to what I interrupted. Living within your means, facing the consequences of your own decisions. That's not a sentence, Nicole. It's reality. For a moment, she looked like she might cry, but the tears didn't come. You've changed, she said quietly. You used to be softer. No, I replied. I used to be easier to exploit. That's not softness, that's weakness disguised as kindness. And I've outgrown it. The silence that followed felt heavy, like the space between us had solidified into something permanent. Finally, she stood. I guess there's nothing I can say to change your mind. You guessed right, I said. She lingered in the doorway as if expecting me to call her back. I didn't. When she finally stepped outside and closed the door behind her, the sound was sharp final. From the window, I watched her walk back to the car without looking over her shoulder. For the first time since this all began, I felt no temptation to run after her. I'd already given her too many second chances. This time, the door was going to stay shut. 3 days after Nicole's visit, I heard another engine in the driveway. This time it was Zachary's truck, minus the bravado it usually carried. When he stepped out, he wasn't wearing the defiant smirk I'd grown used to. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders slouched, his pace measured. I stayed at the door and waited for him to speak first. Larry, he said, offering a small nod. Can we talk? I gave a short, non-committal shrug. Go ahead. I mean inside, he said, glancing toward the cold wind whipping across the yard. I stepped aside, but only far enough to make it clear he wasn't here on equal footing. We moved to the living room, and he sat carefully on the edge of the couch, like he didn't want to seem too comfortable. Look, he began. I know I came at you the wrong way last time. I was angry, scared, said things I shouldn't have. That's putting it lightly, I replied. He nodded, his tone controlled. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to admit I messed up. I handled things badly with you, with the trip, with all of it. It was a noticeable shift from the man who once told me accidents happen to old men. But I knew better than to confuse a change in tone with a change in character. What do you want, Zachary? I asked. He met my eyes. I want to make things right. I know the will is your business, but I'm asking you man to man not to punish Nicole for my mistakes. She planned the trip without me right alongside you, I reminded him. She lied to my face just like you did. I know, he said quickly. But people do stupid things when they feel controlled. I almost laughed. Controlled, you took my money, my hospitality, and my trust, and then decided to cut me out. That's not control, Zachary, that's indulgence without accountability. He shifted gears again, softening his voice. Larry, you've been like a second father to me. I respect what you've built, and I admire how you've handled your life. I don't want us to stay on bad terms. That's easy to say when you're on the losing end, I said. His jaw tightened for just a moment before he smoothed it over. I'm asking for a chance to prove myself. No money, no handouts, just a chance to be back in your good graces. I leaned back, watching him closely. You don't get back in my good graces by asking. You do it by showing. And to be clear, I'm not interested in symbolic gestures. I'm interested in sustained integrity, something I've yet to see from you. He swallowed, then stood. Fair enough, I'll find a way to show you. I didn't bother walking him to the door. As it closed behind him, I realized he might actually try for a while. But whether it was for redemption or for re-entry into my estate, I couldn't yet tell. Either way, I wasn't going to let my guard down. It was a Wednesday morning when my phone rang, displaying a number I hadn't seen in years. It was Reverend Paul from my old neighborhood church. I hadn't been a regular there since before Nicole's marriage, but I still respected the man he'd baptized Nicole when she was a baby and spoken at my late wife's memorial service. "Larry," he said warmly, "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Not at all," I replied, though I could already sense there was a reason for this call beyond catching up. "I've been contacted by your daughter," he said carefully, "and your son-in-law. They're concerned about the distance between you. They asked if I'd be willing to mediate a conversation." I leaned back in my chair. "So they think if they send a pastor, I'll soften." "I think they're hoping your respect for me will at least get you to the table," he admitted. "Larry, I'm not taking sides, but I do believe in reconciliation when it's possible." "When it's possible," I repeated. "And when it's honest." "Reverend, you know I'm not opposed to forgiveness. But this isn't just a disagreement. This is years of entitlement culminating in a calculated betrayal." "I understand," he said. "But I also know that people can change if they're willing." "That's the problem," I replied. "They're not trying to change. They're trying to regain access. There's a difference." He was quiet for a moment. "Would you at least meet with me privately, no one else present? I'd like to hear everything from your perspective." I agreed. Not because I believed a mediated conversation with Nicole would solve anything, but because I respected Reverend Paul enough to give him the full picture before he stepped into the middle of something this ugly. We met the next afternoon at a quiet cafe. I brought copies of the Christmas morning note, the group chat transcripts from Nicole's phone, the legal loan agreements, and even a summary of the smear campaign Margaret had documented. When I finished, the Reverend's expression was a mix of disappointment and grim understanding. "They didn't tell me any of this," he said finally. "Of course they didn't," I replied. "Because if they did, you wouldn't be here trying to bring us together." He sighed. "Larry, I can see why you've drawn such a hard line. This isn't a matter of miscommunication, it's a matter of character. And that's harder to fix. That's why my will is final, Reverend," I said. "And why my boundaries are too." He nodded slowly. "Then perhaps the most I can do is tell them the truth, that reconciliation isn't going to come through me or anyone else until they understand what they've done and why it matters. That's all I ask," I said. When we parted ways, I felt a small sense of relief. Not because anything had changed between me and Nicole, but because someone they respected had now seen the truth for themselves. If they thought they could recruit allies to guilt me into submission, they'd just lost one of their strongest candidates. The day after my meeting with Reverend Paul, I stood in my office looking at the two locked cabinets in the corner. One held my financial records, the other my personal archives, letters, photographs, documents that mapped out my life. For years, those cabinets had been accessible with keys I kept in a drawer by the front door. It had seemed convenient at the time. Now it felt like an open invitation. That morning, I called a locksmith. By noon, both cabinets had new digital locks with unique passcodes known only to me. The front and back doors of the house received the same treatment. The security system, already state-of-the-art, got an upgrade to include biometric access and an automatic alert to my lawyer if someone attempted entry without permission. This wasn't paranoia. This was insurance against manipulation, against sudden visits, and against the possibility that desperation might push them to do something reckless. When the locksmith left, I sat at my desk and drafted one final document for Michael Richardson, a notarized statement outlining my boundaries. It detailed in plain language that I did not consent to any financial arrangement, loan, or inheritance claim from Nicole Hughes, Zachary Thompson Howard, or Kinsley. It included the history of the Christmas trip, the betrayal, the smear campaign, and the attempted staged reconciliation. Michael reviewed it that afternoon. "This reads like a sworn declaration," he said. "It's airtight. If they try to sue, this will stand as strong, preemptive evidence." "Good," I replied. "I don't just want them out of my accounts. I want them out of my legal shadow." With that signed and filed, the last loose thread was my property. The thought of them showing up uninvited again didn't sit well with me. I contacted a real estate firm I trusted and instructed them to discreetly evaluate the house's market value, not because I wanted to sell immediately, but because I wanted the option. If moving meant putting more distance between me and their reach, I'd do it without hesitation. That evening, I stood in the living room with the Christmas tree lights twinkling softly. The decorations had been up far too long. I began packing each ornament carefully, storing them in boxes labeled for next year. But as I placed the folded artificial tree into its container, it struck me next Christmas wouldn't be about them. It wouldn't be about the void they left. It would be about the people who chose to be in my life without strings attached. The last thing I did before bed was take the small brass key from my old cabinet locks and drop it into the fire in my wood stove. I watched it blacken, curl, and finally vanish into the coals. I didn't need it anymore. The locks were new, the rules were set, and the door, both literal and figurative, was now one I alone could open. They'd had their chance, and I had my peace. Looking back, I realize I didn't lose a family. I uncovered the truth about who they really were. Cutting them off wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming my life from people who saw me as a resource, not a person. Justice didn't come from punishing them, it came from ending the cycle of exploitation. If you're a parent, remember generosity without boundaries invites entitlement, not gratitude. And if you've faced betrayal, know this: sometimes silence and distance are the strongest answers you can give. Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your own peace? Share your story below. If this resonated with you, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening.